All right, everybody, welcome back. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add on to this other demo. These are some silhouette studies that I did the last demo. They're about, I think I spent about 15 minutes making these silhouettes right here. Just some copy and pasting techniques and working out from positive and negative or negative to positive shapes just to show you some ideas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my ideas here and see how I want to show you what my next step would be on how I would add on to it, and then how I would start preparing to work into a 3/4 view. So what I'm going to do is in Sketchbook here, I've selected, I'm going to go ahead and just start with this one thumbnail that I have right here. And I'm going to try to sort of figure this out, and I can make some changes on the way, but I want to show you what would be my next approach. So I'm going to select this thumbnail here, copy and paste. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to go back and turn this layer off, come back up here. I'm going to paste this guy in, and I might scale him up and move him up to about right here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste him again. This time I'm going to create another layer here. I'm going to delete though this copy and paste in a minute, because I'm going to sort of draw a top view to my my ship here. So I'm going to rotate him up like this, and I'll show you why I'm doing this. Okay, and then I'm going to move this over to about right here on my paper. Okay, and let's scale in a little bit more. There we go. Okay. And I have this on a separate layer here. So what I'm going to do now is I want to start looking at some basic measurements of my ship to get a good idea of what's taking place and how things are working. So I'm going to come back over. I'm going to add on another layer. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just take the blue setting here really lightly. I'm going to come over and sort of press shift, and I'm going to make these little measurements that are going across like this. Okay, these are going to be really important for me because it's basically giving me an indication of how I'm splitting up some of my ship shape. And what I'm going to do here is I copied and pasted this from a side view because I'm going to draw sort of a top view of my ship, and this is going to give me a little bit of an idea of how parts of my ship might be working, and then I might make some decisions here in my top view that I can't see in the silhouette view. So for example, as I come in here, let's start with what we know. I mean, I need to make decisions and decide, okay, if here's a center line, if I'm looking directly down on top of my ship, I can't tell from the side view how thick my ship is. So now I could come in here and sort of start sketching out a rough idea of what part of the ship might look like. So I could see it's going to end about here, okay? And then I need to decide, is this back part of the ship here, is this going to be a little bit thinner, okay? Is this going to come back here and then taper in? These are questions that I don't know yet, that I really never got answers to in part of my my silhouette study, because my silhouette study right here, you can see I'm just looking at my ship from a side view. I have no idea if this back is in one piece or if it splits in two. I don't have any idea if this back is a lot wider than the front. So looking from, looking at this as I draw it from a top view, I need to sort of distinguish what some of these basics might be. So I'm just going to come in here lightly to sort of sketch, and all this can be changed as I'm working, but right now I really have no idea. I can't tell from a side view how far my ship shape might be coming out. I can't tell if there's wings that might be attached on the back here. All I know is where it ends. I know I have a little hump right here. Okay, so if I come over here and look right here, I can tell somewhere in here I would have a little hump that might be sticking out part of the composition. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just sort of make this real quick top view right here. Some of you might be able to, you could do this on a separate layer. In Sketchbook Pro, we have that symmetry tool that could be very useful, so you're only drawing on one side. I'm just going to rough it just from looking at it here and just start to get a base idea of what my ship is. And again, I can't see, I have a difference here between a top and a bottom. There's quite a bit of thickness between here and here. Just going in and making some little subdivision marks. There's a, looking at the distance from here to here, because what's going to happen is as I'm drawing this from a top view just to figure out where some things might be, but then when I transfer into my 3/4 view, I'm going to start looking at some of these measurements and drawing some cube shapes and plotting out part of my ship, okay, going off of my little measurements that I'm making right here. So just starting with what I know right now, I have measurements are going to go on the X and the Y axes. Okay, so not to confuse you, but sort of in Maya land, the X, let's just say right here, I actually should just say our or horizontal and vertical axes, so I don't confuse anybody. So right now, let's take a look at going horizontal. I know that my ship is sort of broken into 3 tiers right here. I have a lower segment, this part that jettisons out. This part comes out right here on an upper segment. Then I have a part that caves in. I know the overall whole entire distance of my shape. And then I could come over here and look at some vertical marks. I know that from here to here, the ship is going to be in a solid format. Okay. And then I know, let's say about that line right there. Oops, I meant to hit shift there. I'm holding shift to get that straight line. I know that the ship's going to start to merge together and come in about right there. Okay, so the benefit for me figuring out some of these little measurements here, let me come in here and just add a little something too. Let's just say this. Okay, now I'm going to take this layer off here. Let's come in, and the top view is just to help you figure it out. It doesn't have to be 100%. It's just there to help guide you a little bit more. Okay. Because I do have to make some decisions on how and what's going to happen on these shapes when I start to draw in a 3/4 view. So what I like to do, even if you don't do the top view, is now you're going to come in here, and what you want to do is on a separate layer, start sketching out, find your perspective, okay, set up your vanishing points, and then basically start sketching out some blocky shapes, and then come in and start adding in some of these measurement points that I've placed inside here. And so I'm going to do that really quick here. I'm going to come over here, take my ruler, and what I like to do is I like to just sort of rough it in real fast, and then I can come back into it a little bit later and adjust it if I feel that I might have something off of my perspective. Okay, and you'll notice I tend to do this. I know I tend to work in this point of view where I'm sort of looking down. That way I can see multiple sides to a ship. And so right now I can go ahead and sort of block in something about like this. Okay. And of course, well, I need to clean my ruler because I just wiped it on my screen and I got all this black dust that came up there. I'm going to draw through my shape a little bit here. And again, like I said, I'm just doing this perspective really quickly. Okay, I can come back into this and adjust it in a little bit here. So when I come back over here and let's take a look at my ship and see how it's divided. How it's divided. I have a longer part here, a smaller version, and then when I come back to right here, it's actually really close to being in, these are about the same distance, and then this is a little bit longer. So what I can do is come over here now, and I could figure out these distances, and if I were to split these into 3 and say, well, that one's going to be a little bit longer, and then these are going to be a little bit similar towards each other. So that's going to be something similar to my shapes right there. Erase that part right there. So having something about there and there, those are about the same distance. I'm giving a little bit of space because it's going to start to converge, get a little bit smaller there. But this distance from here to here is a little bit longer, just like that distance from here to here. And then these two right here are about the same. So I can sort of judge that in my ship. So what I can do now is come over here, cross this line over, and I'm going to start dividing up part of my space and part of my cube to figure out how I'm going to translate this design that's right here into here. Okay. I also see that I've split my ship into thirds, okay, going across the horizontal axis. And so if I come over here, I can do that same thing. I can split it here and here, and then I could come in with my ruler. And again, I'm using this as a rough guideline to help me sketch out part of my ship. If I hit a point where I'm like, nah, that's a little off, that's fine, I could go in and I can adjust it. But this is what's helping me sort of draw through my shape and figure out how all my lines are working. Okay. Here, let me sketch this back a teeny bit here. Be about there. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to look up. I have this top third piece that comes back from this top piece right here. It comes back to the second and then it ends. So now I could come back here into the second, and I could basically, I'm going to go ahead and just draw some of this freehand, but I'm basically imagining in my mind what this shape would look like as a cube. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and go from here. I'm going to go across to this other side right there. Okay, and then I could come in. This part's going to drop down again. Like I said, I know it's going to drop down to here and go across. I can adjust some of this a little bit later. I know there's going to be a center line that continues to right here where it ends. Okay, so there's my center line going right down there. And then I'm going to come, and then this sort of goes straight back across, but I'm sort of looking down on it. Okay. And it sort of drops, and I have some different levels that are in there, and then it ends about here. Okay. So now I'm going to, that's my base center line that's in there right now. And now I need to come over here and draw sort of that other shape on the other side. We're not going to see as much. It's going to be rounding off a little bit like that. Okay. Let's start down here then. Let's do the bottom piece. On this bottom piece I have, if I make a mark right here, it sort of comes out, this drops and then comes back in. And you can see how this piece right here, can you guys see this that I'm pointing at? This piece right here sits in this middle line right here. So if I come over to this middle line and I measure about there and there, I'm going to have something that's going to be pretty consistent in terms of a measure marking, okay, for me to sketch. So I know that I have a base piece that's going to start about here. It's going to start to come outward like this. What I don't know, and that's my top view, is how wide it is. And that's something I might adjust a little bit later as I'm working. I'm going to drop a center line that's coming down here. I'm going to start to recede that center line going back. And I'm just going to go ahead and come in here and start to figure out. I have this little lip that sticks out. This part comes out here. So I'm going to go ahead and imagine that that's, look at the distance from here to here. Okay, so I'm going to measure that distance from here to here. Bring that across here and figure out that that's about that point right there. I'm going to start to recede that. Again, this is one of the benefits. Some of you guys that press like this on your Cintiq, you don't want to be doing that right now. You want to be using a nice sketchy flow of your pencil because you're basically, you know, going to build up on top of that. And so I'm just lightly, you know, this is the great benefit of Sketchbook Pros. Now I can get in here and I could figure out what some of these shapes are looking like. Okay, I have that large shape, remember, that's going to sort of extrude downward. And here I'm going to bring a center line back. I might not see as much of it. I'm going to bring it into about here. It's coming down about there. I'm going to recede some of that back then into this direction. I haven't established the thickness yet of this. I'm just going to go ahead and rough something in about like there. Okay, I see that, don't get lost in your lines. I see that that line here, there's an angle that comes up right in here. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm looking at, here's that key line. I can see how it angles up and it hits almost the top. So I have an angle that's going to come up. There's my top line. It's going to end about right there. So I can come back over to the other side. If I draw through my shape, I can come over about right here. I'm going to have that same angle right about in there. That's going to be receding back. Okay, and then I have this shape that comes out of there. That's sort of a tough shape to figure out, but I can come in here and sketch. I have an arm that's coming down. Let's just say my arm is coming down from the middle. So I can find the middle center line of that top shape. I can drop something down. And I'm just going to come in here right now and just sketch a cube that's going to be receding back, that's tilted a little bit like this. Okay, in here, and then maybe part of that arm element's coming here. And this is the point where I need to get in. Some of my information in here is not going to be 100%. So now I need to start determining what is the width of my vehicle, what's the angle, how far does this come out. In this side view, I can't tell if I have, maybe I have fins of my vehicle that are coming outward like this. Do you see that? Okay, I can't see that, but what I can do is I can get the majority of the size relationships down into my 3/4 view going off of my measure. So let me finish that. We had this top part that ended about here, let's say. The ship is coming back. There's a very distinct angle. See that angle that's coming in right there? So I know it's hitting about that line, okay? From there, coming all the way back up to that, let's see, let's go across here. To about right there, there's the first third, the second third. Okay, so I have that angle. If I come back here and figure out that angle is roughly right about there. Okay, because there are my third marks. The first third, the second third. It's not quite hitting the top right there, so I'm going to have some type of an angle back here that the rest of my ship is receding at. So I'm going to go in here, sketch some of this in. Now, because of the point of view of part of my ship here, I'm not going to be able to see some of this back here because it's being overlapped, but I can still come in and draw this. Let's say I decided that I wanted to raise this element up above like that. Then I could come in here and I could figure out where that's going to be positioned in here, where the center might be for this. And I can just sort of rough it in, get a better idea of how that's going to take place. Okay. And then I have a fin that's coming out here. This fin that comes out here doesn't quite hit, it lands a little bit before the end of this right here. So that means that fin's going to be about right here, and it's going to land about right there before. See that? Okay, so that's sort of my basic approach right there. I've roughed in a cube shape what my thumbnail was, and I've got it pretty tight. There's still some things that I have to figure out and some details. I need to address this guy that's, you know, this is at an angle right here, and I need to figure out if I want to keep him at an angle or do I want to turn him. There's going to be changes that happen in your transition from your silhouette that move to when you're drawing it in 3D. Your silhouette's only a direct side view, so there's going to be tons of changes. You might change the width on the object. You might change the distance, the way something protrudes outward. So like, for example, here I might decide, you know, hey, I want to really emphasize this bottom piece here sticking out. I'm going to come over here and really sort of sketch this coming out because I like that feeling of this element. I have these levels in here. I haven't sketched these levels in yet. So I can come over here and then imagine I hit right here and I have another level that's sort of raising itself up. This might then have a bump to it like so. Recede back in here. This is the sketch phase of us figuring out exactly, you know, all these little details. I picked a more complicated silhouette to work from, but I wanted to show you what's possible if you just get in and start figuring out. Once I get my shapes in, what I like to do is I like to come back in here then and sort of establish what I call wrapping contours that are going to go over a part of my vehicle here that are going to, excuse me, I can't talk today, that are going to identify exactly what's happening. So one thing I like to do in my sketch is come over here and just get a good idea of where my center line is. Okay, how my center line's interacting with my ship here. How this comes down, drop about here, it's going to come up here, drop down over, it's going to recede back to here. Like that. You see that happening? If I were to cut my cube in half, okay, that's how I sort of divide it up. So from here I would continue to rough it out, and then I would come back in, I would thin down this layer a little bit, and I would put another layer on top of it, and then I would come back with a line and I would start to pull out some little shapes and little details, and then decide if that's the direction that I wanted to move in. So now I could sort of come back in here and start to tighten up part of my shapes, and I might make little decisions like off of the center line I might decide, hey, I want to have a light that's sort of protruding outward right here. And then am I going to see that on the other side? Nope, because it might just be a little bit right there, barely visible. I might drop part of this panel down right here, start to recede this shape backward like this. Okay, I know I have my center line about there. I need to get a line that's going to overlap this and give it some depth. Indicate what that surface is doing. Okay, that does that. Come in here, going to throw another line in the back here. All right. I have that fin. I like that fin, the way that came out, sort of just sticking out right there. And I just sort of created this shape right here. So let me come back here. Let me turn this down a little bit. See where I'm going now? Okay, so I'm going to come back up here. And where that line overlaps right there, and then it comes outward, I'm going to have the same thing on this side. I need to end that quicker because I'm not ending it. And something you could do to figure out a fin, like since I have this in an angle and I want to figure out how that fin is coming out right here on the other side, one thing you can do is you could find the center line of an object. Okay, so if I draw a center line going across here, get match up my perspective exactly. Where I hit the center line of the center of that object, I can come in here where that line goes across. I can put a little point there, and then I could figure out from that point of that center line, I could basically draw a line like this, establishing that angle. Then I could come back from that center line and draw that line going in the opposite direction like that. Does that make sense? That's going to allow me to figure out my fin. But then look at the rear here. See how the rear here is angling this way? So now I need to figure out that angle. It's the same principle. If I come over here and draw a line that goes across and I find that center line right there, and now I come up from that center line and I figure out where that angle hits that center line, which is right here. Now I could come back down and draw that from an angle coming down this way. So you can see it's going to be a pretty steep angle. I'm not going to be able to see part of that fin. So this fin's actually going to sort of end here very quickly and sort of angle off and probably drop behind. So I'm not going to be able to see that full fin inside my sketch because of the angle, the fact that it's doing this. The same thing here, I could come, take that center line, bring this angle forward this way, find where that hits, which is somewhere off my paper here, and then I could come back in and sketch that line about right there. So that's probably going to be about my fin shape for the other side. Okay? Is this making sense to you guys?
Yeah.
I'm not confusing you? Okay. I know I'm working on a little bit more complex of a shape here, but now I'm just, you know, that's instructor Phil, I guess. I'm just going to keep working from this point of view here. Let me figure out what I want to do. I might make some changes. Like I have this little arc, this little angle in here. I need to get in here and get that figured out. Come back here on this side. I drew that out of perspective. Take your ruler, match up to my box shape that's still underneath there. Okay. That way I know how part of my ship is connecting. I can come back in here and start putting some little detail. I had that large shape that comes out, that might come out from underneath down here. I have this sort of element here that's like, I see a line right back here that's going sort of across, and then I like that other line going across this way. So I'm going to see if I can mimic some of that inside my drawing here. Okay. And that comes all the way back to that corner right there, so that's pretty much a dedicated line going this way. I might throw another contour line or two that goes in and shows exactly what's sort of happening on the side of that ship there. But the cool thing is to see if I take away my undersketch, I'm starting to get a much more developed drawing now. That doesn't have all the sketchy lines, but I'm using the sketchy lines to sort of guide me into my sketch. So I'm just going to keep working on this for another, you know, good 15-20 minutes here and develop some of this and see where I end up with. I did make that decision. I'm going to come in here and adjust it. I decided to put this, am I on the wrong layer here? Yes, I am. There we go. I decided to come in here, oops, not with black. I mean, not with blue, with black. I decided to come in and put this element that sort of protrudes like this, right in here. I sort of like that, the way it pops up in the back and enhances part of my shape here. Okay, so now I'm going to come back over here, make sure I'm on the right layer. Let's go back to my pencil, let's go back to blue. I'm going to continue sketching some of this in here. Here it's a smooth finish across, but part of me wants to put a little bump for some reason, because I can have, if I can have something on the top that goes across here, it might add a little bit of detail to part of my ship. I'm going to enhance that center line coming down to about there. Let's put like a little round light or something. Let's say I want to put an antenna off of that. I can measure off of that and find exactly where I had placed my lines before. Okay. And now I'm going to start to sketch this back guy here. He's at an oops, I mean to do that. He's at an angle right here. Do you see that? But he's sticking up a lot higher. If I come over here and go across, he's a lot higher than the rest of the ship. So now I could come back, take one of my underlining sketches that are right here. This, I can see that's the top of my box, right? That's my center line. So if this center line, I have this shape is rounding a little bit. It's going a little bit above it, but I want, so even if I draw a line going across right here, okay, I can still see that this should be up a little bit higher, but it has a tilt on it. So now I need to draw the shape correctly. I'm going to bring this up a little bit higher above it to about there. Okay, recede that back, matching my other lines in perspective. Remember these lines here underneath, under my rough, that box. I can still, if you want to draw your box in red, I've done this quite a few times so I can see some of my lines in there, but if you want to come in here, I could tell that height would be about there. Okay. However, though, I have it angled upward, that angle. So now what I'm going to do is bring the back end of that box up, and then I'm going to angle it up like that. You see that? And then I'm going to recede that line back in the same direction. Okay. Now that's sort of a rough right there, which is, it's okay. But now I want to come in, what I can do is you can take your eraser, the soft eraser, and you could come in and you can sort of dull down some of your edges real quick here. And then I could come back on top of that. Now that I have that cube there, the structure is there, now I could come back on it and I could sort of, you know, I can put any little detail or elements I might have. So one thing I want to do is I wanted to round my edges that are here, there, and get rid of sort of that box shape. I like that little edge going on the back that's coming back here. Okay, and now I need to figure out, I want to put something in the middle there. I'm going to make some type of a light vent in here. So I'm going to sketch a little line like this, come down, checking part of my perspective here. And then I'm looking down on it, right? So I'm going to be able to see that little lip in there, that little difference. And then I'm going to come in here and just put some little vertical, panels going across there like that. So now it looks like I have like just a little vent detail. Okay. If I decide to add anything else, I should save that for the end. I tend to do that as I work. But what I like to do is once I get to a point where my rough starts to make sense and feel perspective, it feels like the perspective's correct, then I come back in and I think of little details to put on to enhance the overall shape. Some of those details would be antennas, hoses, anything that can stick outward that can make that silhouette look a little bit more visually appealing from a 3/4 view is going to make my design look a lot more interesting. So let me finish the back part of this, my sketch here. I started a sketch, gosh darn it. Let me adjust this, and let's go back. I need to figure out how this mounts in, because I have the back of this that I haven't really addressed here. So I'm going to go ahead right in here and just sort of put a base plate for it. Those of you that have had me in Maya before, I talk quite a bit about having base plates for objects. So you never just have two cube ends meet to each other. You want to come in and make sure there's some type of little base that's in there. And I'm going to come back in here. I want to sketch out part of the rest of the back of the ship right now. Okay. I had a fin, another fin that was sort of coming out the side right here. So again, I make that what I call, I don't know if my terminology is correct, I call it a base plate. It's just like a little plate that goes around something, so that way if I sketch the fin in, it's going to start to look correct. So I'm going to come over here. I like the way this fin did this, it came here, and I like the way it angled like that. So to offset that, I'm going to go ahead and on this fin, I'm going to angle it backwards, back a little bit more like that, so it looks a little different. Maybe that's some type of like stabilizing fin that comes out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little detail indication right here. I'm going to see if I can overlap some of the shape here with a little bit of a line, just to make it, you know, what do you call that on an airplane? What's that thing that raises up and down? I should know this, but
Rudder lift?
the rudder, thank you. Is it the rudder? The little piece that extends outward?
It's like a rudder flap.
Yeah, it's like a rudder flap that when you're coming to land, you'll see that thing pop out. So anyway, let me take a look here. I noticed I have a couple lines off. Okay, that's why it's a rough. I want to get that line sort of fixed in there. I need to figure out what I can't tell from my thumbnail is how this, and I had that part that was going to come outward here, but I noticed when I sketched it here, okay, when I noticed right in here, it got really rough in there, and I think it was actually too close between here and here, so maybe I need to drop this part down a little bit. Maybe I sketched it just a little bit too close. So I'm going to lighten down my rough, and then on my sort of secondary rough above it here, I'm going to come in here and see if I can't find a way to, I'm going to drop this down. Now I'm going to find the center really quick here. I'm going to come into this shape here, draw a line across, okay, so I could find exactly where sort of the center is, and drop, maybe there's like a little arm or support that sort of comes downward in here. Maybe that curves this way. All right, and then I'm going to figure out if I can sketch in that shape again. So it's still a box is what I'm going to start with, but it's just at an angle, right? See how it's tilted right here in my side view? That box tilted like that, but it's still a box shape right here. Okay, so all I'm going to do is come in and try to mimic that same box. What I do know is it's going in the same direction with these lines right here. So I'm going to come over here and sketch, and this time I'm going to make it a little bit smaller of a shape. But I need to determine the center line of it. So if that's the center line that comes down from the center there, that's holding it, and it's only that far in distance, that means if I were to, remember I taught you proportional division, if I were to cross that, draw a line through from that corner through that middle, it hit about there, okay, and that would be about the distance on the other side right there. Okay, that's how far that little box shape would go. Okay, my sketchbook, because my eraser doesn't work anymore. Now I have to go click it. It drives me nuts. I never had that problem until I'm here. And then I have this shape sort of angling downward like this. I want to make a little antenna or something maybe coming off of that. I'm going to come in around some of these edges. I want to bring that line backwards this way as well. And that's a hard shape to see, but when I go to render this, it could be really cool because I could have a shadow or light coming in, and there might be an overlap of pattern there. And I might decide later that I want to take that out. Let me lighten this up a little bit. Now I know that the box shape is there. I can lighten up parts of this, and then I can come back and sort of draw on top of it and round it off a little. And then where this hits that back wall right here, I can sort of, maybe I can bring something up like that, bring it over. That's the center line. Okay. All right. And I'm just sort of going over the outline that I've already sketched in. And I'm going to go ahead, let's drop off that rough from before. Now you see how my ship's coming together now? Okay, yeah, go for it. So my ship's really starting to come together a lot more. I mean, look at where I was, 20 minutes ago, right? I'm 30 minutes into this demo. So this is where I was when I started. Really rough. That's fine to be rough. I encourage you to be rough because you tend to find more energy in your drawings when you're working rough. However, though, I'm still thinking about the box. I'm still thinking about center lines. And I know some of it gets confusing on how it works, but if you work from this format and then continue to develop from here, it's such an easier process. I mean, I was there, and then I could look at the difference of how I've sort of tightened that up. And still, this drawing, I'm not finished with it. I need a lot more contour line in here to indicate shapes, and the transition of the form of what's happening. I'm looking back at here now, and what I was thinking of doing was now I'm thinking about coming in and putting another fin shape. Okay, why is this? Oh, there we go. Now I'm thinking about coming in here and, not blue, and putting another fin shape in the back like this. I think that could be pretty cool because it doesn't look as cool from a side view, but when I start looking at my design here, if I get that to pop out right here, it's going to look a lot more visually appealing. Okay, so if I want, I could come in and I could start sketching on that. Give me a second here. Let me just look at my piece. Sometimes I talk too much. I need to just check a couple things. See where I'm at there to the back. I just want to check. I'm losing some of that draw through detail in here, but I could get some of that back by coming back onto this and now adding some more contour lines. So let's do that really quick. This would be a good example. Now that I have shapes that are working, what would be a good example to throw a direction or a contour line in there to add more shape and form? Well, I know if that's my center line, I could come back here and I could take a line oops, not in black. Let's go back to blue. Okay. And I could take a line, let's say from about right here. I could start to bring that line up and then wrap over that shape and bring it back to where it dips back here. And then where that comes through, I'm going to have the same thing on that side. It's going to be really small, but I'm going to be able to see a little of it right in there. Okay. Where this shape pops forward and then this sort of extrudes outward, right? I have a hard time coming in here seeing how this is meeting to this back plate that's bending here. So I need to get that sort of identified. Let me figure this out here. That's more of an angle. That should be a little bit more angled like that. Where this is bending here. I'm actually going to fix this and bring this. If I draw through my shape and figure out the other back side, it's about there. This would be ending and coming downward like about there. So I drew that line too far. I'm going to erase some of this now and start to look at that. I'm also going to erase this part. Isn't going to be seen right there. I was sketching from drawing from underneath. Okay. And this part that was coming down, I ended that too quickly, so I'm going to fix that right now. I want to bring that all the way back to about here. Let's come back just a little bit more into here. And I had this line that was curving down, sort of dropping. Bring it back down into there. I want to enhance, see that curve, this curve that's taking place in here? I want to sort of enhance that in here. So what I love center lines, of course, extremely important to get a good feel. I'm going to throw this up and throw a center line that's sort of coming up in here that shows me exactly where the shape is. Okay, and then I judge the distance. Actually, I'm a teeny bit off there. So I'm going to erase this back just a little bit more. So if I wanted to, just real quick, not to go on a side tangent, how do I figure out let me just create a new layer here. Let's go to red and I'll show you. what shape do I have right here, guys? Here, I'll draw on top of it. I have that. What shape is that? Square. So I can just come in here, I can cross it, and there's my center line right there. So I was really close to it, just a teeny bit off. So I can come back in here to my sketch now. Okay, and if I look back here at that sketch lightly above it, I'm on a different layer here. Maybe I was on. I was having this end about right here, and then I wanted a center line to come up here, to go up above, like that. Okay. You know what, that's why I'm off, is that I drew to that other line, so that's my bad. Here, I was right. I drew it to this edge and not that edge right there. I forgot this is an outside edge here. So let's go back. Let me erase that real quick. Okay, let's get that fixed. So then if I come from here, I'm just going to lightly do it in here, come from that end to here. Yaha, there's my center line right there. Okay, and that's where I was starting to sketch it in. There we go. And the reason why that's important for me is now I could come in here. I bummed out I lost my eraser. Now I could come in here and I could put a couple little details if I like that might represent what this plating is back there. So let me show you how I would do that. I might come in here and just do this. I might sort of take my ruler, just really lightly sort of put a little indication of a, take my eraser, I need to clean this up a little bit right here. I have the same thing on this side now. Okay. Go back, bring this up a little bit more, make sure I get my that down a little bit. That line should be out a teeny bit more right here. So you're going to make these little adjustments to get things to sort of fit in just perfectly. That's totally fine. There we go. I sort of don't like that angle, but I'm going to leave it for right now. I'm going to drop a couple other contour lines through here. Let's wrap a couple lines going from this edge here, going back. And put just like some little details that might be on the side of that ship. I might have some little numbers up in the front here. Let me erase some of this right here that I had. So if let's say if there's some type of numbering up in the front here. I had a light that I put right in here. Let me sketch that back in. And then I might come up here and do something like this and have a little square box. There might be some indications of like numbers or something. It could be a label or something on the top here. These are just little teeny. This is the fun part when you get to come in and you get to sort of detail up. I might take that line and then round it back this way. Okay. And then I'm going to take this off completely. And now my ship's really starting to come to. I need to add that back fin in. Okay, so I'm going to do that really quick right now. So let's take a look at the angle of what's happening with that fin. It's going, oh come on, what happened to my red? There we go. The angle of the fin is going this way. It's almost hitting the center line right there. Okay, the same distance between here to here. And then it angles and sort of comes back here. So what I can do is I can come back and find that point. If I look at that, that was on my second mark midway up. Second mark midway up about right there. Okay, so now if I come over and find the midpoint, it's going to be about there. So now I have a great idea of the angle of my fin. So I can come from here. I'm going to draw that little flap end that's going to hold my part of my fin, and then I could come from this point and sort of sketch. Take my ruler here, and I'm going to sketch that fin just with a straight line like that. I can't really see how far it comes out, but I know it ends at that line here. So if I bring this line from here back, I could tell my fin's going to end about there. It's going at an angle. Even if I look at this from a side view, what does that angle look like right there? Anybody? About, it's not 90. It's maybe close to being about a 45. So if I come back here and find some of that line there, and then here's that fin, that's a 90, so that's would be about a 45. So I can just plot that angle in there. Okay, get that angle going upward, and then the fin right here is at a little bit of an angle. It's not perpendicular to this. Okay, and I could see where that angle hits about right there. Do you see that mark? Okay, so now I could come over here, and I could figure out that mark is about the height, a little bit lower than the height of my ship. That's going to be about right there because this is taller right here. So then I could come over. I need to find the midpoint of that. So I'm on the end. I'm going to come down here to the middle, which is about there, and I could draw a point from that end through about right there. Okay, and that'll be somewhat close. And then I'm going to round a couple edges here. If you decide that, hey, that's not quite where I want my fin to be, you could come back and then you could adjust it. If your fin's going to be better off, you don't have to follow your thumbnail to the T. Your thumbnail is there just to provide you with a direction to go in. It's a problem-solving basis. I might decide, you know what, I like this fin a little bit more like that. And the reason why I like that fin a little bit more is it's a little bit more of a geometric shape. It's not a square. The other fin I was starting to sketch is getting a little bit too. I keep hitting my eraser and it's not working. It was getting a little bit too geometric for me. I'm a little bit too squared off. So now I'm going to sort of, by creating this, I talk about this in some of my Maya modeling classes about having obtuse and acute angles inside geometric shapes makes your design a lot better. And when I look at this right now, I only have 190, but I have an acute angle in here. I have an obtuse angle here. It starts to work a lot easier for me. Okay, I'm going to thin down that. And that's sort of where my ship's at now. Let's add some other detail. I'm going to come over here to this back fin. I could sketch this back fin in if I were to go back to my box shape and figure out how I would draw through my shape right here. But I'm not going to see it, so there's no point in doing it. Okay, but you can understand how you could figure that out, right? You just go down, find the center line of your object, and go from there. Okay, so if I were to do anything right now, I would just come back in here. I still want to add some more just little linear details to part of my ship here. I want to get areas to be emphasized. Put a couple contour lines in there. A little secret, don't put all your contour lines right next to each other in equal spacing. Okay, don't put one like here, quarter inch. It looks repetitive. What you can do is put a contour line next to each other like that, and then break it up and then throw another one in a little bit later. Like so. Okay, that helps divide up and wrap part of the shape of the ship. I'm going to come back in here, and let's say on this element here, I'm going to have a fin in the front that's going to wrap up a little bit here. Okay. Like that. And that's a pretty good point for me right now. I could come into this and I could start, well, that'll be a little bit later. I want you guys to focus on this a little bit more. I was going to put some detail on here and stuff and start to render it out, but that'll be our next step. Okay, we're not going to worry about that right now. Right now, I just wanted to do a quick sort of throw demo at you to explain how you take this silhouette, how you transfer it, break it into parts, break it into measurements, and then start to sketch that from a cube view. Okay. And so when we go back and look at our cube, I mean, we could see these trace lines that are in there, and we could see this cube shape that exists, and we can see, look at the center lines. Look at the center line that comes here, hits the middle of the cube. We know where that center line is. It comes down here. We know where the beginning of the cube is. We know where the end of the cube is. We know how that cube translates out. If your fin sticks out a little bit and it doesn't here, that's fine. You don't have to get that particular. It's there as a guide just to sort of allow you to get across. I don't want you to go back and just be like, oh, Phil, my fin hits here and here it's out and I'm horrible. No, just go back and, you know, make some small changes. Use this as a guide for yourself. But again, I should have probably done an easier demo. I just realizing now this is sort of a complex shape that might scare some of you guys off a little bit. Don't let it. Just stick with cubes, draw the cubes, find the center lines, okay, and we'll go from there. In fact, a real great approach that a lot of designers work with is they do this quite often, is they come in here, they sketch their cube shape, like so. I didn't do this, and I can do another demo on this. I like to start with base shape first, but a lot of designers will do this. They'll come in here, they'll get their shape down, and then they'll come in and they'll do this. See what that is? That's the center line of your ship that you're going to be drawing. Once they get that center line, then you could come in and then you could figure out how the rest of the body shape works from there. You can start putting some lines that wrap over that indicate what's happening in the width and what's happening to the ship. And that's another approach you can do that allows you to get in there very quickly and start to add a lot of detail to a vehicle or a shape. So if I had, let's say, I had fins that come down here, I can now come back in here and figure out, and then I can draw through the other side. And if I figure this shape out, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't know what I just did there. I did something and it zoomed in. Let's go back to pencil. So now if I draw through and figure out what that shape's doing on the opposite side, I could find out where the fin is going to be there. I can find the angle of the fin, and then I could draw through it to see if I'm going to be seeing that fin on the opposite side, which I won't be. It'll be about there. I won't see it. But this fin I will see coming out of this side. So I could come in here, figure that out, and then this fin literally goes straight across. And then I could find that off that center line. From this point here, I can come in there, find that point, and then just sort of, oops, I'm sorry, my touch screen is acting up. And then I could get that angle that's in there. That goes straight back, and it's going to recede to about that point right there. Okay, so that's another approach, but that's just a little bit different. You can start with the center line if you like. There are a lot of designers that do that. I prefer to start with cubes and shapes that exist all together. Okay, so that's sort of another approach. But if you look at both those approaches, there are boxes in perspective with center lines taking place, and that doesn't change at all. Okay, so we're always going from that rough phase, figure out your boxes, figure out your perspective, then come in and start to tighten up some of your line, and then you'll get to this point where your vehicle, you know, right now that vehicle's working well enough for me to go in there and start. I could, first of all, I could add more detail to it. I can come, but I'm going to save that for another lecture where I want to go back over this and punch up part of the silhouette. Okay, and not to go off the track here, but how could I punch up the silhouette of that vehicle right there? Landing gear, hoses, a couple more antennas popping out, little gizmos. And these are little details that you might not notice, but you'll notice it if you, some of you recall back to when you were a kid and you're playing with little model airplanes, or any of you that ever built models. Okay, there are all these little tiny details that add a lot to a vehicle or a ship. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to go ahead and end this. Are there any questions from anybody? Nope? Okay, let me end this right now.